Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, and her address to Congress in the nation's capital today. As Russia continues its brutal invasion in Ukraine, the country's First Lady addressed the conflict's toll on families, highlighting some of the young lives lost while thanking the U.S. for its continued support. Meanwhile, the White House says Russia's planning to officially annex parts of Ukraine that are currently occupied by Russian forces as it steps up attacks on innocent civilian targets right across the country. Joining me now is ABC News national security and defense analyst, former Deputy Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy, along with ABC News' Patrick Greville. He's live from Kyiv in Ukraine. Patrick, let's begin with you. What do you make of the First Lady's address to Congress? How important is the U.S. support? In this country, it's become an afterthought. We just assume that we're doing the right thing with Ukraine. How do you think this might matter, her address today?
Yeah, I think, honestly, that's exactly the reason why Olena Zelenska felt it was so important to address the Congress, because they've built fear over here that increasingly Ukraine is becoming of less interest in Western countries because simply it's been going on so long. And they fear that ultimately that means that we're on a trajectory that favors Russia, because Russia is counting on slowly the unity in the West starting to fade amid high energy prices, and that ultimately time is on Russia's side. And so what she wanted to do, I think, was remind very much Americans that not only is this war continuing, but the images that shocked them, you know, at the start of this war that really appalled the world are still continuing today. And so she told several stories, and really a almost overwhelming number of stories of civilians being struck by missiles, of civilians who've lost limbs, of civilians who've been killed, of this terrible story of a little 4-year-old girl who was killed last week in an indiscriminate strike that hit the center of a central city here in the center of Ukraine. And so I think what she had a very simple message, and it was, we need more weapons, and in particular, we need more air defense. And the appeal she made was to try and return a sense of normality to Ukraine, because, of course, it isn't normal to be in a country where at any moment a missile can strike. You know, we're here in Kyiv. It's a lot more peaceful than it used to be. It's rare now that we get hit by strikes, but it could still happen. You know, the sirens go here every week, and at any moment, really, there could be another attack.
You're absolutely right, Patrick. Her address was so vivid and emotional, and during it, Olena Zelenska said that Ukraine was in need of more military defense aid from the U.S. Let's listen to what she said on that.
I'm asking for something now I would never want to ask. I'm asking for weapons. Weapons that would not be used to wage a war on somebody else's land, but to protect one's home and the right to wake up alive in that home. I'm asking for air defense systems in order for rockets not to be killed, not to kill children in their strollers, in order for rockets not to destroy children's rooms and kill entire families.
So you heard there that was how she shaped her speech, the incredibly awful, tragic, emotional stories tied with the need, she says, for her country to get more military aid from the United States. Mick, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the U.S. will send more of those HIMARS, those advanced rocket systems and ammunition to Ukraine in the coming days. What's making a difference, and what do you think of the First Lady's request for more air defense systems? What's that about?
So, Terry, I think because she really focused very powerfully so on the human cost of this, the deliberate attacks against civilians, she highlighted the defensive weapon systems, which would be largely used to support and defend populated areas where civilians live, and where, quite frankly, there isn't many military targets, if any. These HIMARS are very effective, these high-mobility artillery and rocket systems. They can hit Russian artillery out of range of the Russian artillery. So that's why they're so significant. 4 is important, but we need to get even more. And it's not just the HIMARS. We also need to help them get more artillery and more UAVs. Those are also very effective. This is going to be a long war, unfortunately. But the more we can get to them, the more likely the Ukrainians are successful, because the Russians are running out of some very key advanced weapon systems.
Yeah, it has been a grim few weeks, but Patrick, as Mick says, this is likely to be a long war, and the tide could turn again, but at what cost? Ukraine, you know, is just suffering day by day. You're there. How are people faring there? What's the latest on the fighting, but more on the spirit? I was there at the beginning of the war. There was such intense solidarity, even optimism. What's it feel like there now?
You know, I think that solidarity that you mentioned there, which was extraordinary, I think it still does remain. You know, when you ask the Ukrainians, do they believe they will win, they answer immediately that they do believe they will. But I think there is this apprehension that is appearing because ultimately Russia seems to have managed to recover some of its balance. And, you know, ultimately, I think people perhaps in America are wondering, why are the Ukrainians asking for more weapons? We already know this has been extraordinary and unprecedented, the amount of support that Ukraine has received. But ultimately, for the time being, Ukraine is still in a very unfair fight. When we look in the east, they are massively outgunned by Russia in terms of artillery, which is why they're asking for these long-range systems, the HIMARS, which will try and balance that by taking out a lot of the Russian supply lines and try and disrupt their ability to actually supply ammunition to them. But I think, you know, the key thing here for the Ukrainians is right now what they fear is that we could settle into this trajectory where Russia manages to take the rest of the east and then says basically, well, let's declare a ceasefire now. And when the West hears that, they're going to push Ukraine into accepting a huge loss of territory. It's currently 20% of the country has been taken.
Well, and let me follow up with Mick on that. So there's this sinister finding by U.S. intelligence that the Russians are going to annex the lands of the sovereign nation of Ukraine that they currently occupy. What does that mean? I mean, who would recognize that? Is this really Ukraine's future?
So, Terry, that's right out of the Russian playbook. They essentially create a puppet government. They elect themselves into power. It's basically being run by the Russian government itself. They start issuing passports, and then they claim it's part of Russia, and they will defend it because they're fellow Russians. I don't think anybody will recognize that. I certainly hope they do not. And I don't think that is something that we, the West, should accept. We know the Ukrainians will not accept that, but they are looking to us to maintain our strong partnership with them. I don't see them losing faith in their ability to win. The only thing they're concerned about is losing the full support of the West as this drags on and on.
And that, with winter ahead for Europe, so dependent on that Russian natural gas, it's going to be a very difficult winter there, and difficult for the Ukrainians, of course. Patrick Reevell, Mick Mulroy, thanks as always.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.